We are over halfway through the Premier League season, and the battles have really started to take shape. I'm talking about who is fighting for the title, who is fighting to make Europe, and who is fighting to stay up. And today, I want to talk about the relegation race. But before I do, you have to talk about the three teams who are at the bottom, the three teams who got promoted last season. Burnley, Sheffield United, and Luton Town. And there's no way around it. They've been bad this season. In all likelihood, the three teams that got promoted last year will go straight back to the championship. However, there have been some glimmers of hope. Luton Town are actually only in relegation places based off of goal difference. And last season, Burnley got off to a slow start in the championship before running away with the title. And Sheffield United, despite their struggles, they have rehired a manager who got them to the top half of the Premier League. So today, I'm going to be taking a look at the rest of the Premier League relegation battle and seeing if there are any other clubs with real relegation fears. First, let's look at that team tied with Luton Town on points, Everton. However, they're only tied on points. They are massively ahead on goal difference. And I'm sure you know the reason. Everton received a 10-point deduction this season. If you take away that 10-point deduction, Everton are up in 12th. And even with it, they're on pace to clear 40 points this season. And in addition, their underlying numbers suggest they should be even better. They've been underperforming their expected goals. On an XG table, they're in the top half, not in the relegation zone. However, I do still have a few concerns. Everton are in bad form. They've lost 3 straight games, including a 3-0 loss to Wolves. And things aren't going to get any easier. In their next 4, they have Villa, Tottenham, and City, which, weirdly enough, 3 title challengers. They could easily find themselves in a hole that'll be tough to get out of. And then, I talked about their underlying numbers, but there's nothing to suggest that they'll suddenly start hitting their expected goal mark. Their players are just bad finishers this season. Dominic Calvert-Lewin hasn't gone back to his pre-injury form, Beto hasn't fixed their situation up top, and their only reliable goal scorer has been Decore, and I don't think that's sustainable. Last season, Leicester got relegated with much better underlying numbers than the teams that have stayed up. It's not unfathomable that the same could happen to Everton. However, let's take a step back. They're a team that received a 10-point deduction and are already out of the relegation zone. It's a team that's managed by Sean Dyche, who knows relegation battles. I trust him, and they have Jordan Pickford in goal. He's a strong number 1, and last season, the teams that got relegated had, terrible goalkeeping play. I stand by what I said when Everton received their deduction. I think they'll be able to stay up. Next, there's Brentford, who despite finishing in the top half of the Premier League last season, are currently flirting with relegation. If you haven't looked at the table in a while, they are barely above the relegation zone. And that's kind of weird, because if you look at underlying numbers specifically, they're doing superb. They are 6th in the XG table. That's higher than Tottenham. However, the problem is their actual numbers. They've been conceding far too much, and they've not been scoring. I think one of the main problems is, unlike Everton, they do not have good goalkeeping play. Mark Flecken has been a bad shot stopper this season. Now, I don't trust goalkeeping metrics as much as I do with finishing metrics. I don't think Ederson's the 15th best goalkeeper in the Premier League, but Flecken is at the bottom, and he's at the bottom by a wide margin, and the eye test confirms he's been letting in far too many goals. And on the other end of the field, things aren't much better. They haven't been able to put the ball in the back of the net with regularity, and they've been underperforming their expected goals worse than Everton. And all this is compounded by a bad injury bug. And the result is, Brentford are only 3 points above the relegation zone. And they've lost 5 straight matches. They are in free fall. Thankfully for them, they're about to receive a parachute that goes by the name Ivan Toney. One of the top finishers in the Premier League is about to return, and with him coming back, I'm expecting they're going to start hitting their expected goals, maybe even exceeding it. And in addition, they're going to get healthier, and I want to make it clear, they are very good in terms of their underlying numbers. It is almost unfathomable that they're this far down the table. And this isn't, Leicester's a little bit better than Nottingham Forest and Everton last season. No, they should be competing for Europe if the numbers are correct. It is, again, unfathomable. And with all of that, I think Brentford should be able to stay up. Then we have Nottingham Forest, who are a little tough to gauge as we only have a 3-game sample size under new manager Nuno Espirito Santo. However, if things remain true to how they were under Steve Cooper, there's no need to talk about underlying numbers. Forest are where they're supposed to be on the table. They're not underachieving. They're just not that good. One of the issues isn't goal. I'm sorry, fans still here from the USA days, but Matt Turner hasn't shown himself to be a Premier League level keeper. Thankfully, up front things have been a bit better. Alenga is giving Manchester United seller's remorse, and Chris Wood has been on fire since Santo arrived. However, as I mentioned before, small sample size. Could this be the start of a turnaround, or is it just the new manager bounce? Well, if it's the latter, I think there are some cause for concern. Because Nottingham Forest is only separated from the bottom 3 by Brentford and Everton, 2 clubs I'm expecting to surge up the table in the second half. If a team at the bottom starts to go on a good run, they could overtake Forest if things don't improve under Nuno Espirito Santo. However, that's a lot of ifs, and something to remember is, even under Steve Cooper, they've been better than the bottom 3 teams, both in terms of underlying numbers and actual performance. I think there are some causes for concern, and I'd be worried if I was a Nottingham Forest fan, but they're not in too much danger at the moment. Now we get to talk about my club. You see the jersey in the background, Crystal Palace. I finally get to talk about my team in the video about teams getting relegated. Yeah, things haven't been great this season. No need to talk about underlying numbers, just like Nottingham Forest, just been bad. Finishing up top has been bad. Haven't had a good striker since Christian Benteke that 1 year. Thankfully, though, the defense has been very good. In terms of goals allowed, Crystal Palace are in the top half or bottom half, the good part. And Dean Henderson's been a solid shot stopper since he came in, albeit with limited sample size and some kind of weird moments, but hopefully he gets less erratic as he gets an extended run of games. Speaking of extended run of games, Olise and Eze have started to come back, and that has really helped out Crystal Palace. Olise, he is dealing with another injury, but as he returns to health, as Eze starts to return to form, I'm expecting the Palace to only improve. Now, you could say that they could get injured again. Olise hasn't been healthy, but just like Nottingham Forest, even with our best players out, Palace have been better than the bottom 3 teams. And at this point, it's looking like it's going to be on those teams at the bottom to make a move, because I don't see Crystal Palace being below 35 points. And right now, none of the bottom 3 teams are on pace to hit that. One more team above the bottom 3 I want to talk about is Fulham. And the main reason for that is they're the 4th worst team in the league in terms of expected goals. Their underlying numbers suggest that they should be in a relegation battle. However, they've been able to steal some points throughout the season, and they're in pretty good shape. And the team is strong. Paulinho is great in midfield. Teams like Bayern and Barcelona are interested in him. They have good goalkeeping play with Leno, and they've been able to come up with goals. No one in particular has been great. Raul Jimenez leads the team with 5. Awesome to see him getting back to form after that injury. But even despite not having a great goal scorer, they've been able to come up with goals. Now, I do think that Fulham will fall off a little bit as the season goes on, but they're already on 24 points. They probably only need another 10 to ensure safety with how the bottom 3 looks. And even with my concerns about their underlying numbers, I said they were the 4th worst team in the league. They're still better than the bottom 3 even in their worst metric. Barring a massive collapse, I don't think there's much of a concern for Fulham this year. Those are the 5 teams outside the bottom 3 who I think have relegation concerns this season. All the other 12 clubs, I think they're safe. Even Bournemouth, who had a ton of concerns this season, they've improved massively under Iraola. The gamble to hire him has definitely paid off. And it's even worked out for Gary O'Neill, who got fired from Bournemouth despite keeping them up. He's gone to Wolves and done a great job. I had real relegation worries for Wolves this season, but they've done great. I think I've really underrated Gary O'Neill. And with their win today, I think that Chelsea is definitely out of the relegation race. Chelsea's a mid-table club. Now, on to the bottom 3. It's always going to be tough for a team that gets promoted to stay in the Premier League, but to have 3 teams in the relegation zone is kind of historic. But I think the team that's disappointed the most is Sheffield United. I don't know how, but I think they're a worse team right now than they were in the Championship last season. Losing Njai and losing Sanderberg really hurt the team, and I don't think those players have been replaced. They haven't had a good goal scorer, their defense is bad, and even bringing in Chris Wilder, I don't think is going to help turn things around. I see Sheffield United finishing as the worst team in the league this season. They're the only club I don't really have much hope for. Then there's Burnley, and Burnley's a more typical story in terms of a promoted team. We've seen it before. A team wins the championship with an expansive, possession-based style of play, think they can do the same in the Premier League, and get humbled. What's unique about Burnley has been their transfer strategy. Normally, when you get promoted, you like to take experience. You bring in experienced players who've been in relegation battles before who can help you stay up. Burnley did the opposite. They brought in a ton of young players. And don't get me wrong, I like the players. I think James Trafford's England's future number one. Dara O'Shea is going to lead Ireland becoming a team that qualifies for major tournaments again. And Luka Kolyosho has like 4 countries trying to get him to play for them. But they're a team that got promoted and are playing an expansive style of play and have a ton of young players. What did they expect to happen? This is exactly how the season should be playing out. Did Burnley think they suddenly cracked a code or something? I mean, I get that they had Sean Dyche and they want to get away from a defensive style of play, but just bring in some experience. We'll get to him when we get to Luton, but bring in Ross Barkley. If they have him, they might be able to stay up. I mean, it's going to be tough for Burnley. I think with all the form that they've lost all momentum they had as a championship team. That's why second season syndrome exists. When you have that momentum from the championship, you're able to carry that over. But after a year, that starts to go away. We saw that with Sheffield United. We've seen it with Huddersfield. But with Burnley, it's already gone. Maybe they'll be able to turn things around. Maybe the young players will suddenly improve. I do like Vincent Kompany as a manager, but I don't see it happening for Burnley. If they're able to keep the team together, though, hey, they'll be great in 25-26. Lastly, there's Luton Town, and it was always going to be a struggle for them to stay up. They're operating on a shoestring budget, and I think going into the season, they made the decision that they were fine with being relegated. They still have a terrible collapse in recent memory, and they decided that they were going to take the money that they earned from the Premier League and help establish themselves as a really good championship club, get them in the position that someone like Norwich is in at the moment. And I think that's a responsible decision. And with the meager resources, well, relatively meager, they're spending millions. With the resources they did have, I think they did a very good job. Kaminsky's been a very good signing in goal. I think that Ross Barkley, man, that guy has been amazing. I mean, we all knew he had talent, but for him to finally put it together at Luton, they did a great job with that. And even their strikers have been able to score some goals. I think that they've done everything right, and they've been the best out of the promoted clubs. That being said, despite Everton receiving a points deduction, despite Brentford being hit with an injury bug and underperforming, and all the other teams in the league, they're still in the bottom 3, and I'm expecting them to get relegated. That being said, those 5 teams I mentioned before, if any one of them are a collapse, I think Luton Town's going to be the team that capitalizes. I think Luton have the best chance of staying up, and I love the fight that they've shown, and I'm hoping they'll be back in the Premier League sooner rather than later. But I do think that they're likely to go down. So, in summary, at the current moment, I think out of all the clubs outside the relegation zone, Nottingham Forest is probably in the most trouble. If Nuno Espirito Santo is able to turn them around, maybe it's Everton. If they lose confidence after a bad run of games, they could be in some trouble, but I think that the 3 teams that got promoted last season are going to be the 3 teams that go down. And weirdly enough, when you look at the championship, there's a good chance that the 3 teams that went down are going to come straight back up. We might have the same exact Premier League next season that we did last season. Honestly, that's kind of depressing. I'm going to be rooting for Luton Town. I'm hoping that they can stay up, but hopefully not at the expense of Crystal Palace. But I'm not really expecting them to. I think that the 3 teams at the bottom are going to be going down, and hopefully it'll be a bit more interesting, but it's been pretty bad this season. And yeah, that's all I got to talk about. Sorry I've been gone for a while, but I had finals, and then Christmas, and then I got sick, so ended up being like that. With that, Thanks for watching. See ya.